Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to Beautifully Broken. My name is Sabby, and if you don't know who I am, I started a YouTube channel called Beautifully Broken over a year ago, where I started giving tips, guidance, tools, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, our past and present stories, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I help others gain a deeper understanding of themselves, so that they can heal what needs to be healed in order to move forward into a happier sense of self. Welcome back, everyone, to Beautifully Broken. My name is Sabby, and today I get to sit down and chat with a friend of mine from Whittier College, whose name is Eric Hinwood. We've known each other for a little while. We lost touch, and we've always kind of followed each other on social media, and we reconnected recently, and I asked him to be on my podcast, so it's an honor to have him here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So I guess the reason I'm on this podcast is because I was a filmmaker and performer that ended up having 2 strokes when I was 19 and had to kind of catch up on what mental health is and what these things are and how they work really quickly because all of a sudden it happened to me. So I grew up in Salinas, California, and ended up going to a film production trade school before I went to Whittier College. Which was kind of helpful. I got to go into college with a trade school degree, so I could be paying for school while going to school. And ended up making a couple of feature films, but ran into issues when I had an accident when I was 19 that caused me to then have to look more at mental health and PTSD and brain damage and things like that. Basically what happened to me was I had been basically trying to get back from a hike that a friend and I had gone on, and we had been walking near the shore, and we were trying to get back to the road, and as the tide had come in, it was getting harder and harder to find ways to get back up. And as the sun was setting, we decided, all right, we've got to try to get up here, otherwise we're going to be stuck like 2 hours from anything in Big Sur. It wouldn't be good. We didn't have our phones on us. It was like we have to get back up. And as we were on our way back up, I ended up falling because I guess I grabbed a rock that gave way. I have no memory of that happening, but I guess I did a free fall, managed to do a full rotation while falling.
Oh, wow.
And landed on my feet, which is why I'm alive, but immediately kind of crumpled backwards and hit my head, causing 2 strokes due to blunt force trauma, a subarachnoid hemorrhage and intraparenchymal hemorrhage, if any of our medically minded people are listening. But it was very unusual because something that a doctor told me very early on was when we talk about medicine, we're talking about stereotypes. We're talking about a stroke. We're talking about the stereotypical, most likely common situation. And they're trying not to use that term more and trying to get more specific because they realize it just doesn't apply to people as an overarching term the way that people would like it to. Because I was 19 and mine was due to blunt force trauma. Some people is spontaneous in their 60s due to health problems. They can take very different forms and manifest in very different ways. So that was something I had to figure out right off the bat.
But that's I didn't know. I didn't know. That's the first time. So this is the first time I'm hearing about it. At that point, then how was the recovery process like for you, physically and mentally?
Well, we're going to get into some serious topics with this one. It was tough for 2 reasons. One, because I didn't know all of the details around what had happened. I had to ask someone, why am I in the hospital? What happened to me? I had to, it was years before I found out that I had had strokes. I had thought that it had been brain injuries. I didn't even know what the specifics were. So there was this long period of time when I didn't know how to talk about what was going on because I didn't know what was going on. I just kind of experienced the symptoms and reactions to it without knowing what the cause was, other than, well, I fell off a cliff, which isn't really helpful when you're trying to explain it to doctors.
How did you end up finding out that you did have strokes and it wasn't just brain injury?
Well, I had a friend whose mother died of a subarachnoid hemorrhage.
Mm.
And I Googled that because I recognized the term. I said, wait, I've had one of those. And it popped up on lists of different types of strokes as
Oh,
just one of the types. And I was like, wait, could I really have not known about this for years and
yeah.
found it out through a Google search? And the next time I went to my neurologist, it was, yeah, that's the case.
Oh,
It says
wow.
right here in your medical records, yeah, that was a stroke. Two of
Gee,
them.
that must have been really, really hard to realize, right? And then the recovery process of that, how did that go for you? What did you have to do any sort of like therapy, physical therapy or mental therapy? I don't know, you know what I mean? Like from recovering?
Well, I have never been to a physical therapist to this day. I had almost no professional help after leaving the hospital. In
Mhm.
fact, even the doctor that presided over me refused to do a follow-up appointment.
Wow,
Um,
did you find out why or?
um, well, it turns out he's had a number of medical malpractice issues in the past. Um, so I guess it was just something to do with that.
Yeah.
My physical therapy was my uncle told me to run 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and
Mhm.
to add an extra 15 minutes each week because that was, considered he was a professional runner, and that was, how he built back up or how he got people in better shape preparing for races and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So I just did that, and then was in the gym about 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. So dove all into physical fitness because I had had a lot of things happen. I was 167 pounds going into the hospital. I was about 127 leaving.
Oh, wow.
So I was, had lost almost all of the muscle, fat, anything left on my body. I was just skin and bones leaving. I had to kind of regrow. I was even half an inch shorter due to spinal compression because of the fall. So
Oh,
it was significant. I had lost about, I guess, close to as much blood as you can lose because I had a little bit of organ failure from not having enough blood in my body at the time. So it
wow.
was, there was a lot of different factors that hit in different ways. So
Basically rebuilt yourself from the ground up, sounds like.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, with the added caveat of without having access to medical attention,
Mhm.
because I didn't see a neurologist from 2 weeks after I had the accident
Mhm.
for about 4 years.
Oh,
So there
wow.
was a huge amount of time of I had no idea if what I was doing was right or if this was going to be helpful or hurtful. It was just me and what I could Google.
So, how long was the recovery from the time you had the stroke to when you were able to get back on your feet and you just kind of dove yourself into fitness? What was that like for you mentally? Like, what were some of the things that you went through or struggled with?
Well, one of my first memories is them putting me in a walker. I think it was about 3 days after the accident,
Mhm.
trying to get me to walk down the hall. But I was in a walker for about the first month. Um, and physically, people seem to think that I was back to 100% within the first month or two.
Mm.
But I would say that every year since the accident, I'm mentally clearer than I was the year before.
Oh, wow.
So I would say that there's never been a time when I have stopped seeing improvement in
Mhm.
regard to mental acuity or sharpness.
Mhm.
Um, but some things have gotten worse with time.
Yeah.
For example, memory and digestive issues because of the organ stuff that happened. So it was two parts. Some things continually got better, some things gradually got worse.
Mhm.
But I guess the nature of varied problems. I guess I don't know.
No, you're good. So, how have you been mentally handling all of that? I mean, that's a tough thing to go through and overcome.
um, well, I mean, at first it was all the fuel went straight into workouts. The stereotypical let's take all of these emotions and just try to work them out of my system.
Yeah.
And so I guess in some ways I was doing almost like a form of like trauma avoidance. Like I was trying to avoid tackling that issue to actually dealing with the fact of, hey, you woke up in a body that was 40 pounds lighter, half an inch shorter, and didn't feel like years, and like almost like a reincarnation experience, but still in the same life.
Yeah.
It was very, I didn't know what to think of it. In the first year, there was even this sense of, well, went beyond the first year, but mostly in the first year, this sense of, am I doing what he would have wanted me to do? This sense of, I almost felt like I had to be accurate to who I was before, because it almost felt like I was playing the part of him without feeling like him anymore.
Do you feel like you're a completely different person from when that happened?
No, I mean, as I have gotten mentally clearer, it's helped me to kind of put it in perspective that you are the same individual, but you had a number of changes. You don't feel like the previous individual because you had this moment of, it was like falling asleep in one body and waking up in a new location in a different body. And that's, hard to work around, but that's partially because of the medication I was put on in the hospital. It caused a 72-hour blackout, where I was able to speak with people, but I have no memory of speaking with those individuals. So, it was caused by things, and it was starting to break down the, why did I have that experience that helped? And then I was kind of able to channel that into more creative outlets. I mentioned like filmmaker, performer stuff. I was able to channel it more into that as years went by from when the accident happened.
So when everyone has their passion that kind of gives them a driving life force when we go through adversity, and even when those darker moments happen in our lives. I mean, as a creative, I'm sure you can relate to this. It fuels your creativity. It gives your art life, as strange as that sounds. Those heightened emotions, those heightened experiences. Did you have any of those?
Yeah. Well, I think it was in episode 4 of the podcast. You were talking about breakups and how people experience things differently or stronger than others. And when I was listening to it, it reminded me of a short film I had made called Post-Traumatic Stress Breakup, PTSD, as an idea of what it could be like to go through that experience as someone with PTSD. But I can only say what it can be like, because you can get PTSD from so many different ways. It can manifest in everyone so differently. So I figured all I could do was portray my experience of it. But that was helpful. And it even helped the people that weren't involved, that were just kind of onlookers. They were able to see it and kind of recognize what I was going through in a way I wasn't able to verbalize. If that makes sense.
No, 100%. I'm like that with writing. And even oddly enough, even through the podcast, sometimes we can convey things that we're feeling through what we love to do without knowing it. Like I'll look back or listen back to a podcast or watch a video, and I forget what I say. But then when I go and listen back, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. But at the time, I just didn't know how to articulate it. So that's a beautiful thing when that turns into something to help other people understand. Was it cathartic? I'm sure it was cathartic for you at some point. Did it help you kind of heal and process things as well with creating that?
Yeah, I think part of it is it helped me to, I almost want to say, destigmatize what I would call survival mechanisms. Because a lot of things that can be labeled as survival mechanisms for me weren't all bad, especially when so many people are going through problems and don't always have access to the appropriate type of care, be it medical care or mental health care or whatever. So for me, some of the things that I looked at were, what are some of my survival techniques, things that are these helpful or harmful? Some of the things that helped me were things like breathing meditations, workouts, showering, or changing the time of day that I do things. Like I find that if I do things at night, there's so much less stress and I'm so much more productive, because it helps my anxiety to do things at night in ways that it wouldn't during the day. So things like that, it helped me to recognize that these are ways to maintain productivity when I'm going through negative situations. And it can be things to fall back on during the bad times that aren't necessarily bad. of course, there are harmful survival techniques as well,
Yeah,
both to myself and others, and I've got to watch out not to slip into those.
Yeah.
But it did help me to normalize the fact that there are things that I can fall back on as survival techniques when I need them, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's exactly, funny enough, I have a video that's going up on Monday, and I talk about that. It's like these labels that we place on ourselves of thinking that we, once, like when you get sick, right? Say you get bronchitis. When you go to the doctor, they give you antibiotics and then you get better, right? But then for the rest of your life, you don't say that, oh, I have bronchitis. No, because you've gotten better, right? So, but the next time you get sick, you know what to do. You have those survival techniques or those tools to pull out of your back pocket when you need them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly it. Yeah. Sometimes it's easy to fall back into, as silly as it sounds, like the victim mode, of, hey, like, I went through X, Y, and Z, and I'm still living in that past. So I have a question though. How did you pull yourself out of almost the stigma of instead of being a victim, and because what you went through is very hard. How did you pull yourself out besides fitness? Like what were your driving forces that helped you through?
Well, I think in some ways this kind of ties into like the day-to-day of COVID life now. Is it's shown me what I'm like when I'm only accountable to myself. It shows me where my motivation comes from. And I probably wouldn't have known how to answer that question a year ago.
Yeah.
But now a lot of the things that I look at is, especially in regard to filmmaking, is justice. Is something that really motivates me, is the idea that if more people were aware of this, there could be justice.
Yeah.
That concept, that's like a huge motivator for me. Or things in regard to my physical health, oddly enough, is interactions with friends. When I have that thought of, well, if I eat because eating, digestion is hard for me because of the organ stuff. I'll have the thought like, well, if I push myself and I try to eat a lot of food and work out, that'll mean that I'll be able to go on this hike with friends and I'll be able to enjoy it and I won't hold them back.
Yeah.
And so one of my bigger motivators for keeping myself in shape is to not negatively affect the people around me. And that sense, like, it sounds like, well, why is that really the only thing was that really why you take care of yourself? Like, no, but it's my biggest motivator to do it. It's what puts the fire in me to go get it done.
Yeah.
And it's not why I do it, but it's what helps me to do it.
Yeah, it's what gets you.
It's what I can focus on.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of people struggle to get, you see those TikToks or whatever, the motivation to get to the gym. That's exactly it. But like way more deep and serious and like honestly authentic. And a lot of people have that, where fitness for me was how I overcame so much as well. So I totally get it. It's like your own form of therapy in a way, because you're just mentally there with yourself, working through what you need to work through. Even with like lifting weights, right? I don't know if you find this, but like when I feel like I lift heavier, or I hit a certain PR or whatever, I feel like, to me, I haven't given up. And you didn't give up on yourself. And I think that's beautiful, to be honest. A lot of people would have given up. Honestly, like a lot of people in your shoes would have just given up and let whatever happened to them take them. But you just like, nope, I'm getting through this and I'm going to get better. And
well, one of the things that helped me and actually did motivate me to be doing that was actually, again, from a Google search. I looked up who the most likely people were to survive the type of strokes that I'd had. And I found that marathon runners were the most likely because they had excellent cardiovascular health. And I figured, well, because the doctors had given me a 25% chance of making it through the 6 months after leaving the hospital. So it was very much a like flip a coin, but chances are this coin has already been weighed in not your favor. So I knew that I had to do something extra if I wanted to try to give myself a fighting chance. And knowing that statistic was like, well, there we go. They're the only group of people that have a higher likelihood of survival. I need to become like them if I want to try to make it through this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And I mean, I've never run a marathon. but it worked well enough.
Would you ever try to do one, or like one of those I don't know what they're called, but would you ever consider doing one?
Tough Mudder, Spartan races.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's what I was.
I have done, I think 5 Spartan races and a
Oh,
Tough Mudder.
nice. That is
Um,
really cool.
the first, I actually had a thing where I wanted to try to beat my time from pre-accident to see
Hmm.
if I could surpass where I had been previously.
Hmm.
And I managed to beat the time, so I was happy about
Oh, that's
that.
amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun, and it gave me something to work towards. But the unfortunate side effect was after seeing that, everyone thought I was 100% better.
Mm.
They saw that exterior situation of my physical health is good. That means my mental health must also be good. And that was not the case.
So, to that point, when did that flip? When did you start diving deep into the more mental health aspect of everything you had gone through?
Well, actually wasn't until probably around fall of 2016. And the accident was December of 2013. So it would have been maybe about 2 years later.
Mhm.
It was a while before I really started to get into that. Um, but I started noticing that it began to affect things like my relationships, and not just like romantic relationships, like teacher student or friend to friend relationships. Like it would impact all relationships with other people.
Mhm.
um, and I started to notice that I guess trauma compounds on
Mm.
itself. If you don't handle the thing that happened before, when the next thing happens, that just gets layered on top of it. And then the next thing happens, and that gets layered on top of it. And if you don't deal with the things, it just becomes this gigantic mass of, I don't know how to deal with any of this because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
And I ended up reaching that point where I felt like I couldn't leave my bedroom, because all of these things had compounded, and I had agoraphobia of like leaving the house. I had all these different like anxieties and weird things I didn't understand going on. And I ended up signing myself up for a PTSD clinical trial
Oh,
because
wow.
I had no idea what to do. And they were the ones that gave me the diagnosis. You have this. This is what it is.
Mhm.
Here are things that can help.
Yeah. When
But
you
that wasn't
found,
until maybe like spring of 2017.
oh, yeah, that's, yeah, wow. When you found out you had PTSD, how did you feel about it? Were you relieved or shocked or?
Um, well, I had been looking up my own symptoms and kind of had the idea that that might be the case.
Mhm.
And that was why I reached out to the PTSD clinical trial.
Yeah,
So when I got the diagnosis, it was an okay, this is what I thought it was.
yeah. And
Um,
how did you move through that? Like, what were your, I'm assuming you started going to therapy after that?
so I had been in therapy the spring semester of my senior year of college. And then after that, I don't think it was until summer of 2018, summer or fall of 2018,
Mhm.
that I saw anyone else. So there was a significant gap there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there was a good amount of just kind of had to figure things out, deal with. Um, but also other situations, other support groups. There's a stroke support group for LA County.
Oh,
There were other support groups from different aspects of my life, different things where I had, solid group of high school friends that stuck together that I could fall back on, of like, hey, I need to talk to someone about this, things like
yeah.
that.
That's
Um,
that's good. That's helpful. A lot of people just don't talk about anything, so that's good. At least you were opening up, you know. When you
that
were just
back and
like,
forth.
yeah, continuously just like shoving it down and going,
Hmm.
no, this is fine. And it's like that meme with the dog with like everything on fire and just
Hmm.
not good.
I think my favorite rendition of that meme was one where he's surrounded by plants and you only see the fire reflected in his eyes,
Yeah,
kind of as an idea of like, you don't know what's going on inside other people. And you might believe them if they tell you things are fine, if it looks like things are fine, but you don't know.
yeah. We all wear a mask. We all wear a mask and we all pretend we're fine to a certain degree until, like you said, it reaches a point where you have to deal with it. Otherwise, it just affects the people around you. When you did start going to therapy and dealing with your PTSD, how was that? Was that overwhelming? How did you feel about it? Like, walk me through how that experience was for you.
Well, I think the first thing was coming to terms with some of the stigma around not having what I want to say, like 100% in regard to mental health. It's
Mhm.
almost like the first time anything gets written on that mental health card, all of a sudden it's like, they're a whole different person now. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's something wrong with them or something unusual that like separates them from society. And I think one of the first things for me was being like, no, like a lot of people have trauma. A lot of people would probably be diagnosed with PTSD if they actually took the time to realize what was going on with themselves as well.
Mhm.
I mean, um, especially now with COVID and everything going on, like I think a lot of more people are going through different types of trauma or experiencing different types of anxiety and depression and different things that,
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more common than people like to say that it is.
Mhm.
And the idea, like neurotypical, people said I was no longer neurotypical, but I thought the whole idea of being neurotypical was weird because what it really meant to me was I was neurotypical pre PTSD.
Mm.
But to me, PTSD is just how you respond to hard events in life. Like that to me would almost make me think that everyone is neurotypical until they experience life, and then it's about what they do afterwards. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the whole way it was set up just didn't make sense to me. So that was a hard thing to overcome, I guess.
Trauma therapy, I know for everyone is different, right? And I know with PTSD, you have a lot of memory loss and a lot of regressed memories of things that you don't remember. Did you have to, go through any of that sort of therapy? I know there's hypnotherapy, there's even there's a bunch. I did hypnotherapy. Did you have to do any of those? And how was it for you?
So I definitely have experienced a lot of memory issues. I guess because of the brain damage compounded with PTSD.
Yeah.
And I guess depression in and of itself can cause an amount of memory loss that I wasn't really aware of that earlier.
Oh, 100%. I
Um,
really had dissociating like most of my life, so I get it.
mhm. Yeah, I wasn't aware that that was part of that until more recently. Um, but yeah, so something a doctor recommended was actually that I write a written memory because as I talked about, mental clarity has improved, but memory has gotten worse.
Mhm.
Kind of as a way to almost like a nip it in the bud kind of idea is we'll get it written down. That way you can't lose it. You can't get rid of it. It's stuck there. And so starting around the beginning of 2019, but really once lockdown hit, I had more time to focus on it. I started writing this actual in order document, and it's about 1,400 pages now
Oh, wow.
of just my entire like this is what I remember, and I continue to write things in as I have different memory stimuli that will remind me of different things for a certain amount of time, and I make sure I get it written down before I forget it. Things like that. Um, but um, but something I didn't realize about getting memories back is that the emotions sometimes never left.
Mm.
Like I would have this random unattached emotion just kind of floating in the void, and I'm like, why do I feel this way? And
Yeah.
then I would get a memory back, and I would connect that emotion to that memory and be like, that's the reason. That's why. I had no idea that one of these random emotions was connected to this specific event. And that then allows me to almost bring that emotion down and solidify it and break it apart and figure out, process it, get through it, because I know the reason why I feel that way now.
Oh,
But
that's
that was something I never considered in regard to memory loss, is that the emotions don't necessarily leave, and they're unable. I couldn't touch them until I knew what they were attached to, and then
that
I was able to
is
process it.
it's funny. I didn't think about that until you mentioned that. And that, like, now that I do, I've had the exact same experience, but you articulated it so well. It's literally like you'll experience an emotion like, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. Especially when you have PTSD, because something may trigger you and you have no idea what the heck it might be.
Mhm.
You're
Why
like,
this?
what?
What's going
Yeah.
on? Right?
You're like, what? Like, why am I really angry? I don't understand. And then you're
Mhm.
right. You'll think of the memory of where it may have come from, like the root cause of it. And then you can attach it to that memory. And then it's easier for you to process it and deal with it and heal from it in a sense. Do you find that writing down those memories kind of helps you heal through those things as well, like those unattached emotions that come back?
It's definitely a process to get there. When
Mm-hmm.
I'm first, sometimes if it's an important event, it's like, wow, this changes everything. I had no idea. Like that was why this person and I stopped communicating. Like I didn't know we had this falling out over work or whatever it might
Yeah.
have been. Like it can be really impactful, and it can be like, oh, this changes things. Like this brings up new emotions because I didn't realize this is what my life was like. But then at the same time, it's okay, let's look at this. This is more like the real big picture.
Yeah.
Let's break this down and figure this out and come to terms with that. And then there's one less random emotion floating around that can come out randomly and unexpectedly, and just slowly starting to break that down over time, I guess.
Really cool. That's really cool. It's almost like you're finding these different puzzle pieces to a puzzle and you don't know what the end result's going to be. That's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. That's like
Yeah.
exactly what it's really, that's kind of like, that's what I imagined in my head as you were explaining that. It's
Yeah,
really
that's a great way to put it.
the creative in me is coming out because I'm less caffeinated now and I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah, but my PTSD specialist, I think he might have said something like, or something that came up in conversation with him was the idea of it's hard to know where you're headed or where you want to go if you don't know where you came from.
mm,
Um, and especially as someone we're looking forward, if my memory gets worse,
mhm.
well, this is a way to always know where I came from
Yeah.
without having to have that fear of losing the memories that gave me the morals that I have, for example. That was something I was worried about before I had done this, was what if I lose the inciting moment that made me like care about people, about
Yeah.
certain situations or whatever.
Yeah.
So it definitely provides some security in that.
Do you think you're going to use those memories that you've written down as almost like a creative outlet to make something that you can remember it by?
Um, well, I did end up doing one thing. I was writing about a film that I had tried to make but had been unable to complete. I had gotten about, I think, 52 minutes of it, shot and edited feature film. This is going to go, but it wasn't finished.
Mm.
And I had made it when I was about 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never finished it. I'd never known how to get it finished because, I didn't look like that anymore.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the same country it was shot in. There was just no way to recreate that. And what I ended up doing was I took the film and changed the whole idea of it, where the whole thing was a story told to another person,
Mm-hmm.
as if it's a flashback.
Mm.
But I made the film about this person's experience as a prisoner of war,
Mm-hmm.
who is recounting his experience of how he ended up where he was. And my reason for doing that was I wanted to draw upon all of these feelings and emotions and things that I had been experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and to put that into a character where those things could come out.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, the character that made the most sense when I was describing the emotions I wanted to get across, when I told people about it, was what sounds like a prisoner of war. And I hadn't really had that thought of like, that might be, there might be similarities there.
Yeah.
In regard to sensations of feeling trapped, of being unable to do things, of almost feeling like you're fighting against something, almost the personification of depression that happens all the time. That
Yeah.
idea of you're fighting back against an opposing and overpowering force that is keeping you repressed for some reason.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I guess that was my attempt to take what I had learned and put it into something.
No, that is you.
Yeah.
I followed you through that entire explanation because it made sense.
Cool. I wasn't sure if it was.
No, you're like, I'm just gonna go with it. No, yeah. It's very relatable because we all have an opposing force of some sort. For depression, you've experienced depression, obviously. For depression, like you have, it's almost like a voice in your head, like a backseat driver, or I call it like an anxiety gremlin so many times. I just imagine like this little troll in my head that's just trying to like, sounds dark, but like drive me off the side of the road, you know?
Mhm.
So that's that comparison of a prisoner of war I really like, because that's what it is. You feel trapped to an extent. You just feel trapped within your own mind. And I'm sure at some point you felt trapped within your own body as well, right? Because it was a
Mhm.
completely different experience for you. So that it makes complete sense, and it totally resonates with me. I'm sure it's going to resonate with so many other people.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that's always the goal, that that people manage to get some sort of positive takeaway from it.
yeah.
Because I mean, it's dark stuff, you know, talking about um, things that people normally wouldn't. Because I actually did have a situation where I was physically unsafe in an area I lived. So there is, you know, it draws on real things, but I hope that people do manage to get that sense of, um, oh, like I do when I watch a movie that impacts me, that sense of like, maybe I learned something about myself. Maybe there's something I could use that's helpful, or even just that sense of I'm not the only one going through this. You know, I hope people get something from it.
No, I feel the same way when I watch movies. I feel like well, we both we did film in Whittier, but like I, when I watch
As much film
movies,
as there was at Whittier.
which is not much. To my listeners, that's why my YouTube videos aren't that great. No, uh, no, when I watch films even now, I connect with it on such a deep level. So like when I watch it through a different lens, I'm understanding. I feel like it helps me express myself in a weird way, and it's cathartic through watching something else, because it feels like that character is explaining to me how I feel, and then I can relate to it and process that emotion. And same with music. I feel the same way about music.
Yeah, like getting your emotions told to you if they're
Mhm.
right is almost helpful.
Yeah. It is. Because sometimes, yeah, like sometimes we just have it so stuck in our heads that we can't words and like physical words. We have it so stuck in our head that sometimes our own words can't explain it. And so when you see other creative mediums, it helps. And
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I wish it was easier to verbalize certain emotions, but it's almost like feeling those emotions prevents the verbalization thereof.
Yeah, because they can suffocate you sometimes if you get
Mhm.
kind of stuck in that spiral and that hole. It'll just take you down like a wild ride, and you're not in your body anymore or in your own mind. And when that happens, like actually very recently, I got a lot of anxiety, and it's just like, okay, I like named 5 things I could see, 5 things I could touch or hear, just grounding techniques. During COVID, I know for me this happened. I don't know if this happened for you, but like I got a little bit more triggered emotionally. Um, and my mental health was like kind of slipping down. Did you experience any of that, and how did you get through it? Especially with PTSD.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's harder. There's no way around that. You know, there's no substitute for in-person human contact, in my opinion. You know, we try to do it with I find phone calls to be one of the more helpful options. But there's no replacing it. You know, there's no substitution that feels the same as
Yeah.
being in a room full of friends. So I do notice that like a lot of the positive things where I'm looking forward to doing this, those things aren't there anymore because the day-to-day routine is generic, for lack of a better word. Um, how did it trigger? Accountability. When I'm accountable to other people, I'm better. When I'm only accountable to myself, I have thoughts like, I don't need to shave. I don't need to do this. Like these normal things. Like I don't really need to keep these things up.
Mm.
The only reason I do certain things is for the intention of seeing other people.
Mm.
And without that, some things fall by the wayside. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm not going to be wearing the full suit every day. There's no need for that. But even smaller things, like I found myself in situations where I would think like, I don't really need to get this done because I could do it tomorrow, because today there's nothing, like there's no time limit.
Yeah.
And that sense, especially during the beginning, when it was just lockdown, everyone close everything, no one move. There was really that sense of like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing? What are the reasons to do things when there's nothing to get done?
Yeah.
And then coming up with like,
so how did you push through those issues, of not being able to rely on other people to kind of hold you accountable and seeing other people?
I mean, it's definitely difficult. Some things I realized I didn't need to do. Like when things shut down, I haven't cut my hair since.
I know, I noticed. I was like, oh, Eric has long hair now. Cool.
Right? Because I realized that a lot of what I looked like was based on roles I would get or preparing for roles I would get. And I have never had a chance to just see what I would look like if I grew my hair out. So I figured, well, why don't I take advantage of some of the opportunities this presents me with, of not having to look like whatever character I'm supposed to look like next, or of not having to, if you're not seeing friends every week, if you're not going on a new date every week, if you're not doing all these things, it gives you more time for self-reflection to figure out like, which friends do I really want to see? What am I really looking for in a date? It just gives a little more time to mull things over, I guess, and make decisions. And so I think maybe my best takeaway from it is that I know those answers better, is that I feel like I do know who I would want to see and why I would want to see them, and what I want to do more than I did, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of like sounds like you're just better understanding yourself and what you want and what you need and what you value and what you don't value and how to go forward. I feel like this last year in COVID, like if I were to meet me a year ago, now I would not recognize her. I'd be like, I'm like, wow, you're worrying about all these things. And it's a very, very, very different mindset. It kind of just forced everyone to deal with all their stuff, basically, because you're isolated and alone and you're with your own thoughts, unless, you escape and went to like drinking every day or doing drugs or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely people that have like just said, all right, I'm out, I'm going to a compound, I'm not going to deal with this. But not everyone has that option.
Or they're just like drunk 24/7. You're like, okay, yep.
Right? Not everyone has that option either.
No.
Or the liver strength.
Oh no, God help them. I have no idea. I've seen it. I'm just like, wow, okay, so this is how we're dealing with things. So the last thing I have for you, and I like doing this at the end every time, and I'm sure you've heard from the last few episodes. If you were to give anyone advice who has gone through what you have gone through and resonates with it, what would you say to them?
So I used to know exactly what I would say to this, but it's almost become a controversial opinion in 2021. What I would have said is don't trust your medical professional, is Google everything, get a second opinion, see a different medical professional, and tell them what the first one told you, and get them almost into a sort of conversation to figure out what's actually going on. Because I was told such wrong information from the doctor overseeing me in the hospital that I would have changed so much if I had known. So I would say look for information, because if you think you know something, you might, but you might be holding yourself back because you think something is solid and truth when it really isn't. So that used to be my like, oh yeah, definitely, like that's a solid thing to say. Now I almost want to add in the caveat, like if a large group of medical professionals say something's the case, that's going to be the case. But there can be individuals, there can be outliers that at least gave me information that was very detrimental to my recovery. So I would say making sure that you're not getting all of your info from the same individual can be very helpful, because being able to Google, being able to contrast what a neurologist says compared to a PTSD specialist, people have different fields. People will tackle issues in different ways. And like, I didn't really know what the word holistic meant. I had kind of seen it as like, well, that's for things that aren't considered actual medicine. But now I almost see it as it's an overarching look at all of the different things, where I would say that seeing the PTSD specialist and the neurologist and a normal, like getting a physical checkup doctor, would all be under holistic health, because of that sense of you got to figure out where your issue's coming from. Because I found that some of my digestive issues came from PTSD and not from the organ failure. And that those things were working together and making it worse, magnifying each other. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't compared and contrasted different specialists against each other. So kind of that, that interesting, you're not a specialist, but you almost have to get the specialists to work with and against each other to figure things out.
No, I think that's smart. That's really, really smart.
Yeah, I have a question for you, actually.
Oh, Eric has a question for me. This is the first. Okay, sorry.
Well, my question is, you invited me on with an idea of what I might talk about, and you've let me do most of the talking through this. What were you hoping that I might get across to people, and did I get that, or was there something else that came across that you didn't expect?
So both. I would say so I had an idea of what we were going to talk about, but not like 100%. And so for me, what I wanted to get across is, if someone heard your story of adversity, that they could learn that you can get through it, and that you can become stronger from it and improve from it, and that healing and getting through some of those tougher times in life is necessary. It's necessary for us to grow. It's necessary for us to heal, and that it's okay, because we're all human beings and we all go through crazy shit in life. And we all need help sometimes. We all need to go talk to someone. We all need to know that it's okay to go through adversity. That's what I was hoping. And you did tackle that, because you articulated it in such a different way. But I like different, because how you say things and how you communicate things may resonate to someone else, like someone that is not in my audience, or we all have different communication styles. So your story and how you communicate could reach so many people that have probably gone through something similar. Maybe obviously not the exact same thing. Everyone's lives are different. But they could probably connect with it and know that they're not alone, and that someone else has survived and someone else has pushed through, and like you said, didn't just turn to stuffing everything down and pretending like everything was fine. and very quickly, learned, hey, it's okay for me to deal with what's in my mind, and you can't just avoid all of it. So yeah, especially as a male. That's why I asked you to come on here, especially when I posted it on my Instagram. I was like, I wonder, I got more males reaching out to me than females, which I found very interesting, because normally females are so quick to open up and be vulnerable. It's
but you didn't find that to be the case here.
No.
Yeah, I wonder if that shows a change in how people look at it, because I mean, we're in the situation I grew up in, like with my friends growing up, there were only 2 words for people with mental health issues, and I can't say either of them. And if someone went to therapy, that meant they had a serious issue and no one should be doing it. Like, that was what I grew up with,
Like, it was really taboo, like very, very, especially with males. Like even like people in my family, I still find going to therapy to them is foreign, not my immediate family to an extent, because my immediate family, we have like a marriage family counselor that we all still go to from time to time. But my extended family, I'd say it's like, oh, you have depression, you're going to therapy, what's wrong, what happened? I'm like, okay, well, something doesn't need to happen for you to go. Like, you can just go. So yeah.
Or one that was really hard for me to get across, because I don't really come from a very wealthy family. So one of the issues for me was getting across this idea of, if you put money into working on yourself, you can then make more money because you're a more complete human being that can accomplish tasks and do things easier. And it was so hard to get that across to my family. So that is something I wanted to say when you talked about people relating to things.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, money will be a big issue for a lot of people, and having access to care. That's why I mentioned the survival mechanisms that, like, for people that don't or can't get to it, or it will take them a long time to get to it, or if they save up for it, like, it's worth it.
Yeah.
But there's going to be issues there. It's going to be hard to convince people that it's worth it until they see the results.
100%. I think it took me a long time to convey to my own family that my depression was real. Because for a long time, they didn't understand it, not out of like malicious intent. They just didn't understand what it was. And then it took me to like take my own life, and for my brother to like talk me down, for them to be like, oh, this is real. Okay. She really needs to, like, we need to find someone. And I've always been very thankful that my brother actually told my family. If he didn't, and it was once again just another thing that was glossed over, then I don't think I'd be here today for sure, 100%. So I had like a little bit of luck on my side as well, to be honest. And some people don't get that lucky. Some people doesn't, they don't have that person in their life that will do that for them, or they don't have someone that will fight for them and tell everyone, hey, this is what's happening, and be their voice. They have to be their own voice, and that's hard. And that's why I started this, because I wanted my voice to be the voice of someone who just doesn't have one. And that's why I interview other people and enjoy it, because it gives a voice to those who can't speak.
And obviously provides a service that people need.
Yeah. I wish it didn't take COVID for people to understand how important their mental health is. I wish that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it took less serious things than, the situation you were describing, for people to take things seriously. But I think we have kind of learned that it's hard to get people to believe in anything they can't see. Right?
Yeah. Oh, God.
If they don't see it, if they don't see a crutch or a cast, they're just going to pretend that means there's nothing wrong. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like an invisible, if they don't see proof, then it's not real.
Right. Especially when so much of, our day-to-day life is like, how do you prove things? How do you prove happiness or sadness or depression? How do you prove emotions other than the expression on your face, which you can choose whether to show to other people or not? You'd think people would get the idea that there's no way to know unless we let you know. And even then, we can't always let people know because we don't know how.
Don't know how, or they don't feel safe. And sometimes you just don't feel safe with other people, which in that case, you gotta really look at who you're hanging out with, or they just don't feel safe with themselves to allow themselves to feel what they need to feel. And I've encountered so many people like that, where I'll notice like very clearly that they have some stuff they need to go through, and obviously it's not my place to say anything, but they just don't feel safe feeling what they are feeling.
Yeah, almost that like sense of tension of holding something back.
Oh, yeah. Feeling. And then at that point, then you're not being authentic, and then it's hard to relate to someone. You can tell that there's a wall, and when you have that wall, you're not being your authentic self. But if you just talk about maybe some of those bricks in that wall in front of you and allow the other person to see it, and you just take one by one out, then they see more of you, and they can relate to you on a deeper level, which is like true emotional intimacy. And that's like huge for anything, especially PTSD. Oh my God. I used to have a wall up all the time. I'm sure you noticed. Like a lot of people now, when they talk to me, they're like, it's different. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you're just like, you're letting me in. There's not like this weird shield that you have. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It just comes with dealing with your stuff, honestly.
I think that's important insight. The metaphor about acknowledging the wall means you can start to dismantle it. I think that's powerful. I hadn't thought about it in that term, that that way before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have almost this motivator of like, let me quickly get the message out so other people don't have to go through what I went through.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Like
And I almost find that to be like catchy, you know, like it rubs off on people. It's like, oh, now I'm feeling that like, yeah, I got to get this up so help out the
No, that's totally it. Like it's like inspiration. Like you listen to someone and they inspire you and you're like, okay, I gotta tell my story so someone else can do it. And yeah, I feel like real people inspire other people, so it'll just keep growing.
Yeah, it's good to get that proof that, hey, this works. This is helping people. People like this.
Exactly, because you never know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I always just say if it helps one person, that's all that matters to me. So thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate your time and sharing your story and giving us your journey and through all the adversity you've faced and how strong you are.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. You know, I hope that people manage to get something good out of this. If they get a little nugget of knowledge that helps in some way. I mean, that's the goal. But have a great time, you know, exploring these topics and kind of learning more about it. Because I feel like every time I talk about this with someone else, I learn something too. So always happy to be a part of things.
To all my listeners out there, I'm going to link all of Eric's social media and any way for you to contact him in the information of this podcast. And you can contact him if you have any questions or if you resonate with his story.
Thank you so much for listening. And remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.